so I call the Tuesday, May 7th, 2024 City Commission meeting to order. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Butler,
Here?
Commissioner Adamczyk,
Here.
Commissioner Bacola,
Here?
Commissioner Opel,
Present.
Commissioner Motta.
Here.
Mayor, we have 5 commissioners present. The quorum of 3 is met.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, next item on the agenda is public comment. Individuals should address all comments and questions to the commission. Each person will be limited to one speaking opportunity for up to 5 minutes for this particular section. And it is for items that are not currently on the consent agenda or the general agenda. And we had 3 individuals that signed up, so the first person to speak will be Donna.
Thank you. I've already filled this out.
That's fine.
Okay.
So just state your name and address for the record.
Donna Schenk-Hamlin, 1922 Leavenworth Street. Normally, you've probably heard me introduce myself as a member of the Landmark Water Tower Neighborhood Association because it's in that context that I've come before you in the past. But today, I'm here to represent and open up for you a new coalition of Manhattan neighborhoods. This coalition has evolved over the last 6 months with the discovery that there has been a lapse over the last 10 years or so since the Manhattan Urban Area Comprehensive Plan of any updated listing of neighborhoods officially recognized by the city, and an account for who to contact and what sort of communication protocol would be most useful, both to the city and to those neighborhood associations. 20 years ago, I recall we had this map that's on your handout that I've given to you. Sorry, I didn't get this 48 hours ahead of time, so you can't see my PDF, but it'll be part of the record. We had a neighborhood recognition program, and at that time, it was basically for systematic communication between city staff, commissioners, and designated recognized neighborhoods. All you had to do to be a recognized neighborhood was to collectively define your boundaries and what made sense, what commonalities you had, establish key contacts or representatives, and agree on the basis of non-discrimination of membership that you would be inclusive within those boundaries. It lapsed, people move into this town and they don't know that there are associations, and we've just lost the habit of regular consultation with these groups. So a number of us who are in the continued neighborhood associations, I'm in Landmark Water Tower Neighborhood Association, decided we'd reach out to the others from this list that I believe you gave us in 2014, Jason, from a spreadsheet. And we just called people up and said, do you still exist? Would you like to start talking with other neighborhoods? We basically acknowledge what the city website says, that the information is old. And so we're here to help you update that information. We also acknowledge that in the community planning's website under neighborhoods, it says that we would like to research best practices from other communities. Well, I've been here since 1976, and we have had a lot of good practices that we've just forgotten about. One of those practices is a neighborhood grants program. Karen, you remember when we had this? It was a way of the cities getting input on items that didn't come up on the CIP list, but the neighbors saw every day. But it was competitive, so neighborhood associations got to compete for a limited amount of grant money to solve these problems. That was just one very productive best practice that came out of regular consultation. So we decided in the interim, I had talked to former members of the community development program who are developing something called Neighborhoods MHK, but those regions that you see listed on the large map, which has also sort of been lost to the website, but which I discovered when I looked it up in Yahoo, there's a very large sort of a district outline of areas that are probably good as a shorthand for municipal planning. And we now recognize the names of these areas like the downtown core, but that isn't a neighborhood. It doesn't relate to the identities or the relationships that are developed naturally when neighbors come together, when they interact, welcome newcomers to get together over problems. So we're making that distinction between neighborhoods and what I would call districts. We started taking steps. We've had bi-monthly meetings. The first one in September was just to gauge the interest among about 8 neighborhood associations we could track down in revitalizing ourselves, and out of that came sort of a protocol of rotational hosts. We actually visit the neighborhood, we get an introduction to their history, what makes them special, and in the process, we also talk about what are some of the issues that you hear about as you talk to your neighbors. So the we, when I talk about we, myself, Butch Krim, who is also with the Briarcliff Homeowners Association, we have volunteered as administrators of communication between these. And you'll find in your notes that we've agreed as a body to name ourselves the Manhattan Neighborhoods Coalition, and are glad with the information that you have there for you to contact us and start figuring out how we can work together.
Okay, thank you, Nan. Okay, Mark.
Promise not to come back very often. Hey, Mark Hattisall, 1206 Stacy Lane. I'm here tonight because as we're hiring a new city manager over the next few months here, I would like us to see if we could start trying to steer this Titanic, which is terribly slow, into a more, change the culture a little bit of the government, city government here in Manhattan. My concern is that there's the process seems to have been you empower your department heads and then they go and do their things and you don't micromanage them, which is a good idea, except when their guiding principle then becomes a thick book of regulations and ordinances that they have to follow, and there's no human factor allowed to determine whether this is really something that the city wants, needs, or if it's just a matter of it doesn't fit the things we dreamed up when we made these ordinances up, and so we can't do it. For example, it was over 5 years ago that Brahms wanted to come to Manhattan. The people of Manhattan wanted Brahms to come to Manhattan, and yet here 5 years later, there's no Brahms in Manhattan because the city was a little rigid on their sign ordinance things, and they told him no, probably figuring that Brahms would come back with their hat in their hand and say, please, well, okay, we'll do it with less stuff. 5 years have gone by, no sign of Brahms, but I've heard they're now moving forward with their Topeka and Lawrence locations, but still nothing here. I've been told that the mall ownership is trying to attract negotiating with a business company that people have been clamoring to get to Manhattan for some years now. And they're running into the roadblock of some kind of signage issues to where I don't want the city to screw this thing up and then lose that business opportunity also that people have been asking to get simply because we're too rigid on some of our sign ordinances and things like that. So what the point is that I know Katie has got a terribly hard job. She's supposed to try to keep the city from getting sued. The problem is, I think we're over-attorneying everything. There's a concern, over the last several years, we've heard that the amount of work that the city attorney's office has is so huge. Well, why has it gotten so huge? I talk to people in business, and they say if they listen to their lawyers, they would never sign a contract or make a deal if that was the only input they got. And I'm thinking that the only input the city is kind of getting is from the city attorney's office with advice that's not going to get them sued, but causes almost everything else to grind to a complete halt. Why have we not gotten a workforce housing policy? Because the attorney's office, I think, is trying to dream one up. The problem is, you just passed on an emergency basis an affordable housing thing because you deemed there was a deadline and it was an emergency, I believe. And so why is that not an emergency on an ongoing basis to where we can somehow bend the rules enough to get accomplished what the city wants accomplished? So and the problem is like this mall thing, if this thing craps out, you guys are probably never going to hear about it because it was killed before it even got to the point where the city commission could say, yeah, this is a good idea. I would have voted for those sign ordinance changes in order to get this company that people have been clamoring for. But it may never get to the point where the commission never knows that this is even being discussed. So the point is what I want to try to do is as you get the new city manager in, we need to kind of start making it such that the answer to people when they come to us with requests is yes, if, instead of no, and this is why. Because that no, this is why is stagnating the growth of Manhattan for the last decade or more. And so I know Bill Frost, in the old days, people told me that Bill would say, oh, we can't do that. And then you keep talking to him, and over a period of time, he would come up with a solution. We need to start encouraging more solutions instead of just the rigid, it doesn't fit the guidelines, we can't do it kind of a thing. So sorry, I don't mean to beat on you about it, but this whole thing is business people are telling me that good ideas go to die in the city attorney's office because there's so much overregulation of stuff, and we're trying to avoid getting sued so bad that good ideas are dying. And so we can't have that. Customer service has got to be more for the city than no while you're smiling. That's not customer service. Customer service is, okay, how can we make this thing happen that people want? And so that's the key here. I want you to start seeing what we can do to try to encourage the yes is the first answer out of the city administration's mouth, and this is how we're going to help you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Gary? Consent agenda item, okay. Is there anyone else that would like to make a public comment on anything that is not currently on the consent agenda or the general agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to commissioner comments. John?
I got an email from director of Boys and Girls Club here in Manhattan. Apparently they're going to be taking over an old early childhood education center. They're going to have spots for 156 kids, so it's really great news. Really happy to see that, so congratulations and good luck to them.
Karen?
Wow. Discovery Center had a fantastic day on Saturday. I don't know how many thousands of people were there, but it was really fun. And just a lot of enthusiasm from kids about science and that kind of thing. And also, just thank you, Donna and Butch. We should pursue this. I'd like to see us find a way to carve out some small grant funds for that. And the Deal Foundation has grants for signage and art and that kind of thing too. So think about that.
Just one thing, if you get a chance, go by Sunset Zoo and check out the new sculptures that were dedicated Saturday. They really look great, and I enjoyed going to that dedication ceremony. So let's move on to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are those of a routine and housekeeping nature, or those items which have previously been reviewed by the City Commission and may be approved in one motion. The Commissioner may request an item be removed for separate discussion and consideration immediately following the consent agenda. Comment from the public related to any item on the consent agenda the City Commission is allowed. Each person will be limited to one speaking opportunity for up to 5 minutes for this section. Are there any items the Commission wishes to pull from the consent agenda?
I just want a clarification on number 2. Is that the same bunch of bond things we bonded 2 weeks ago? Is that just a second reading, or what's the?
This is an item we need to clarify for you all. We have a unique process on these resolutions, but yes, it is the same number of projects, the same thing identified a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Commissioner, yep. When you're ready for that clarification, we can come back to that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just had a question on the disorderly conduct. What are we changing that from? I probably could have looked a little harder, but.
There's a phrase that has, there's, There's a phrase that has to be removed because the Supreme Court invalidated it, and it's in the AIS.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the exact quote's there. It talks about being noisy. It's the phrase that you have to remove noisy conduct tending to reasonably arouse alarm, anger, or resentment in others.
Okay. We just have
Supreme
to-
Court found it unconstitutional.
Okay. Sounds good.
If you
Okay,
want
then-
to go to public comment
Yep,
first, you
yes.
can, and we'll come back.
Then we'll go to public comment at this point. I think, Gary, you wanted to make a comment, so you can go first.
Good evening, Commissioners, staff. My name is Gary Oles. I live at 3308 Frontier Circle. I want to call the Commission's attention to, on the consent agenda, letter I, number 1, which pertains to the license agreement with the RCPD and the Law Board regarding the placement of, in the right-of-way of license plate readers. I just want to make the comment, and my comments, I have no expectation, and of course I shouldn't have any expectation that anything's going to change, because it's kind of late in the game, and that's the challenge I think that the citizens have. Oftentimes, we show up late in the game. It's like in budgeting. Everybody should have showed up, in April and now May, talking about budgets. But pertaining to the license plate reader, I'm going to butcher a quote from a guy that most of us know from our American history class by the name of Benjamin Franklin, pertaining to liberty and safety or security. I believe the quote goes something to the effect of, for those who are willing to give up liberty in the name of safety or security, they may have neither, to paraphrase him. My concern, and I want to alert you all and those who are listening and may watch this later, is I don't know the full spectrum of the issue with regards to these license plate readers. I just know that they're going to read license plates so that they will assist in the event, as they have historically, because they've only been around for a few years, but as they have historically helped out in catching people that obviously are committing a crime. And that's all well and good and understandable from a law enforcement perspective, but my concern as a citizen is the fact that we don't know what that technology will be like in the future. I think it's something to think about. I have no expectation that you're going to turn them down because it's probably natural or normal, but I want you to be warned that, well, I guess I could say if we live long enough, I look around the room, a day is going to come where these license plate readers or similar equipment are going to do far more than that. And all you have to do is look at China and the number of cameras that are out. Cameras are the way it is, and the argument is the fact that, well, if you haven't done anything wrong, what do you have to worry about? That's not the issue. So just keep it in mind, because who knows, some of you may be on the commission in 10 or 20 years when the next proposal comes up that there's a face recognition. Yeah, I'm looking at you. Face recognition software that, shall we say, keeps track of folks. So I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your service. And on a non-related item, these are my last 3 tax bills, and the city is like a drunken sailor, spending, spending, spending. Hats off, last year it went down by $6, but the previous 2 years it went up by $300. So I would say pat yourself on the back, but it's the wrong commission. Well, almost. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Is there anyone else that wishes to make public comment on any item on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and come back to the commissioners.
If I may, Mayor.
Go ahead.
We are in a unique position on our bond sales. We are headed towards a negotiated sale. We traditionally go to a public offering sale. We did not complete our audit on time this year, so we did not get a rating from Moody's. That forces us into a negotiated sale. Both the summary memos for these items highlight this fact. I bring it to your attention because it's an anomaly. Last time we did it, I believe, Rena, was 2020, and the circumstances were similar. But there are just moments in time where we don't get those audits done. Rena can elaborate on the audit if you'd like her to, but this does put us in a position where we're gonna go work with an entity. We're gonna place this debt privately. We're gonna use that entity as an underwriter and find the best rate we possibly can at this point in time. We don't, and Tom Calico with Baker Tilly is also joining us. If you have questions of him, we're not opposed to this process. We think we'll net a result that is favorable, but we are entering into a different process than we typically do for our temp notes and our bonds themselves. So I didn't want to just let this go by because it is not typical. It is on the consent because you have taken prior action, but we are pivoting towards a negotiated sale versus a public offering. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Is the reason we're not done with the audit on our side or the auditor?
Good evening, Commissioners. It's a combination of both, city staff shortage as well as auditor staff shortage.
Rena, can you elaborate on GASB and some of the items you've had to come up with this year compared to last?
So this 2022 audit, we are working through GASB 87, which is the first time that we have implemented it, and that is related to our leases, whether we are leasing out our property or we are leasing property of others. And so that's a new pronouncement that we have to book. We are working with AGH out of Wichita to assist us with that. In addition, we have some single audit requirements for our airport as well as our CDBG, which are normal single audit, but then this year we found out also that we have to include the FEMA floods from 2019. A lot of the larger expenses started coming in 2022, so we're working through that as well.
Just one question, Jason. What do you think the impact of that will have on the interest rate?
It's a good,
Is it going to be positive, negative, or a wash?
it's a good question. Tom, if you want to hop in there and address that. I think historically, we've seen a minor tick up in the rate, but Tom, you want to elaborate on that?
Sure, be happy to. So we're switching from a competitive sale in which we pick a time and a date and time, and potential purchasers in the form of investment banks will place their bids, and the lowest bid being the lowest interest rate wins. What we're doing now is pivoting to a negotiated sale where you select a single underwriter. In this case, it will be Piper Sandler, who is selected through a competitive process. And we will negotiate the sale of both the bonds and the notes with Piper Sandler. There will still be an element of competition. Piper Sandler will put the word out to potential investors, and on the 16th, as planned, potential investors will have an opportunity to place their orders. If we are successful in getting more orders than we do have bonds and notes, there may be an opportunity to reduce the interest rate. But the bottom line is, that the most competition comes from a competitive sale. What we are doing is, a bit of a step down in terms of the level of competition, and therefore you can probably expect that the rate will be slightly higher than what we would have achieved in a typical, competitive sale. But it's necessary because, whereas Manhattan's debt is usually something that the market knows well, right? They're general obligation bonds or notes from a well-rated, well-known, frequently in the market issuer. Now, because of the unique situation with the 2022 audit, there is a story to be told. We need to rely on the underwriter's sales force to explain to potential investors what happened. Why doesn't the city have its 2022 audit? And once that story is told, we expect that there will be ready investors. But the story still needs to be told. And that's the value of switching to a negotiated sale. I will add that we were successful in getting bond insurance getting insurance for both the bonds and the notes through Build America Mutual. And by virtue of the insurance, both obligations will be rated AA. So we do have that working for us as well. Happy to respond to any questions.
Historically, Tom, just talk to us a little bit about where temp notes and bonds have been in the past 2 or 3 sales.
In terms of interest rate?
Yes.
Well, I don't know if I can do the top of my head. I will tell you that, we're looking for both the bonds and the notes. We expect to be, somewhere north of 4%, which is what we can expect in the current market. I hesitate to say, what the differential would be in this negotiated sale versus a competitive sale. It's very, we're in sort of uncharted territory. I would think, something in the 20 basis point range is probably not unreasonable. So maybe 20 basis points higher than what we would see in a typical competitive sale. So that's 0.2%.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a potential that we don't find a buyer?
There's always that potential. I don't think it's likely. Especially with the bond insurance. I don't think it's likely.
I have a question on a different item. Go ahead. I was just curious on item H, the application for 2024 Emergency Solution Grant Funds. I noticed that Be Able is not included as a partner on that. Is there, have they not approached the city to participate in that grant opportunity?
Stephanie can elaborate. I know these user groups we've had relationships with for years, but perhaps Stephanie can explain why.
So the Emergency Solutions Grant, that's limited to providers that have some sort of shelter. And so that's where we are limited in who can actually, who can be the recipient of those funds. At this time, to our knowledge, Be Able does not provide any sort of shelter service, so they wouldn't be eligible.
So as they develop those 3 properties that they've just acquired on Yuma Street, they might be eligible in the future?
Potentially, we could look into it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other comments from the commission on the consent agenda? I would like to ask, I see the director of RCPD is here, just to clarify the license plate reader.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Members of the City Commission, Brian Pete with the Riley County Police Department. The automated license plate readers is, I personally want to say I fully understand that concern. But at the same time, the law enforcement, my ethos, as well as all my peers is that we're here to enforce and protect the Constitution, not to look for ways to circumvent it. So what we're looking at using the ALPRs for is the investigations of crimes of violence that happen within the community, anything from kidnappings to shootings. In several different cases, ALPRs in neighboring jurisdictions has helped us immediately solve crimes. And in one incident that we had with an aggravated kidnapping, had we have had this technology in place, we would have probably been able to have resolved the issue before it made its way out to Topeka, resulting in pit maneuvering. So that's what it's used for investigative purposes. We don't collect data. It's unlawful for us to collect data without a criminal nexus to it. So I just want to do my best. I know there are going to be people that are going to be suspicious of government, and rightfully so. But this department, I think this county and this city have a very strong reputation of holding ourselves accountable and adhering to the letter of the law. And the other aspect about ALPRs is this is a technology that's been out here for well over 15 years. If you even look at tollways, different things like that, parking in different zones, that's what automated license plate readers pretty much are. It's just to validate or to verify a vehicle or whose vehicle belongs to. Again, like even in tollways, that's when you cross a boothless toll. That's how you're tracked to turn in money.
Okay, thank you. Any commissioner questions on that?
We're approving this, which is fine with me, but the law board has already approved this. So do we have to approve it too, or?
Yes, and the reason is some of these will go inside the city limits. It won't just be in the county.
Oh, okay.
Because there'll be some down in Aggieville, and I'm all for it, because I've always been for, if you can use electronic means to assist in police enforcement, it saves people, and the officers can do other things, and so, these cameras are gonna really help with solving some issues, and they have in the past.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Mayor, if I may add to that, I don't want to divulge too much information, but last weekend, we had an incident where there was a gunshot that happened in Aggieville, and by the officers being at the right place at the right time, we were able to identify suspect vehicles. Had those officers not have been there, been a second too late, we would not have been able to identify who may or may not have been involved in that shooting incident, and that's what these cameras are used for, and it's just to make those identifications.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Chief.
sir.
If there aren't any other comments on the consent agenda, we can take a motion.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Adamczyk,
Yes.
Commissioner McCullough,
Yes?
Commissioner Opelt,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Mayor Butler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, then we'll move on to the general agenda. And the first item on the general agenda is consider first reading of an ordinance amending the Manhattan Urban Area Comprehensive Plan to adopt the Beyond Tomorrow Downtown Plan.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ben Schmiel. I'm a senior planner here at the City of Manhattan. Tonight, we're asking you to consider adoption of the Beyond Tomorrow Downtown Plan. This has been a process that has taken the most of about 2 years. Quite a significant process that included hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals in the community, various stakeholder groups, steering committee, technical committee, really just a master class, in my opinion, of public engagement and putting together a document reflective of the community vision for an area plan. You've seen this document before, the last draft that we published a couple of months ago. Not a lot has changed since then, so I won't be going into a ton of detail. Just some basics of the document structure and some updates of imagery that we've created since then. So this is the plan area that this plan would apply to in terms of policy recommendations and targeted growth. This is the vision statement that was created by our steering committee for the project. This is a good summary map showing how we are looking at downtown moving into the future. So what we did was we took downtown and broke it up into multiple sub-areas to really home in on exactly what the community vision is for that specific sub-area. Broke them into roughly 2 categories, areas of change and improvement, and then areas of stability and maintenance. So those areas of change and improvement are where we expect to see more targeted change in the future that was supported by the community. We developed some growth models to demonstrate what that vision for development and growth in downtown could look like. This is an orthogonal view of that model as downtown is today. This represents a low growth scenario, a medium growth scenario, and then a high growth scenario for downtown. We also developed what we are calling conceptual projects. This is a lot of the work that we've been doing the past couple of months to create this imagery, vet it to the community, and really get good feedback on them. These are purely hypothetical projects, developments, public improvements that maybe represent maybe a need that we heard throughout the process from the community. They may represent maybe a project that is in theme or meeting the need of a specific sub-area. So just a lot of diversity of different projects that really just provide inspiration for what the future of downtown could look like in a specific context. The second part of the plan establishes policy goals and principles based on that overall vision statement. So looking at different topics, planning topics of downtown, ranging from parking to historic preservation to economic development, and establishing goals and principles for the city to pursue in the future. And lastly, an implementation plan. This was probably the most work that went into the last couple of months, really tweaking this as we got feedback on it. So this implementation plan really takes those goals, the vision, the principles, and puts action to them. We prioritize these different action items in terms of their impact to downtown in order to their impact to creating the vision, coming to fruition. And then we give it potential triggers, identify lead agencies and potential supportive agencies for those actions. So we are fully in the adoption phase. Tonight we are presenting an ordinance for first reading. And we, after adoption, we'll start to put together a promotional video that will probably serve as more of the face of the plan, but based on all the work that has gone into it. We do have a preview of that video that we'd like to show you. That is, if I can get it to work. No sound, but that's okay. This just showcases some of those conceptual projects that are included in the plan. A lot of this imagery was created by in-house staff as well as donated by various developers and architecture firms in town. So what I loved about that was that it really feels like a community plan where everyone came together and sort of created a stone soup into this plan. So are there any questions for me?
I have some feedback, if that's okay.
Sure.
First of all, great plan. This report is really good. I can tell you all put a lot of work into it. I think one of the most important things, on here on page 8, where it talks about, just using things as a conceptual framework. I think kind of further on in over here too. Sorry, I had a lot of notes. Talking about how it's not prescriptive, but it's kind of more imaginative, and kind of emphasizing the importance of taking every individual project in context when that time comes. I think it's really important to highlight that. There's a couple of things that I kind of didn't really get. So with the on page 22, you get this space net total thing, and didn't really make a lot of sense. Can you kind of explain that a little better? I think there was something about parking too. Sorry, there's a lot in here.
Yeah, so the capacity table on page 22, it is essentially taking that virtual, that 3D model, and extrapolating what that additional growth and development could result in terms of square footage within downtown. It's specifically looking at gross square footage.
Right.
So it's kind of a rough calculation, but it really helps to conceptualize what, we as a community would potentially be comfortable with in terms of additional capacity for different uses, space types within downtown.
Okay. And then you have some.
Peter, can I just follow up on that for a
Yeah.
second? So I have an earlier version of the report. I'm looking at a version from February, and I understand there have been revisions. Is that, in the table that I looked at, it's not populated?
Correct.
Is that the case? Is that still X's and?
No, it's all
No,
filled
it's
in.
been populated. We needed to finalize the model before we could run those calculations, which is why there was a placeholder in the previous draft.
And then in the growth scenarios pictures where you have kind of, like page 28 down there, is there a way we could maybe like put the different like the new buildings for each scenario with different colors? It's kind of hard to tell, like, aside from there's just more buildings, kind of to differentiate the between the different scenarios.
Yeah, you can kind of see the effect in this presentation because they're layered, right? And ultimately, we expect a lot more interaction with the actual video that will show that a little bit better.
Okay.
But we can certainly do that for the document if that would be helpful.
And then moving on. Okay, so the riverfront district, I know MCM kind of volunteered their space to be studied. Is there like an interest in them moving out of that space, or like where is that kind of coming from? Because obviously they own it, they'd have to sell it, and there would have to be some kind of incentive for them to do that. Not from us necessarily, but
Sure. Part of this process included kind of a parallel study called the South Downtown Brownfields Study. The city was the benefactor of a grant from the Flint Hills Regional Council to look at brownfields in the south area of downtown. As a part of that process, which a consultant was hired for, different what are called catalyst sites were identified, mostly looking at larger sites with single ownership that could potentially be redeveloped. So that study was looking at those. So MCM was identified as a site and approached in that process. They've been very great to work with. We were very clear that this is just a study and will hopefully be helpful to you in the future as you consider options. In those meetings with those property owners, it was made very clear to us that they're happy where they are. They have no plans to move anytime soon, but they were happy to kind of volunteer their site to let us dream with it a little bit.
I'm glad we kind of had that relationship before, presenting something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, that's just a note. I think I have 2 or 3 more. What's that?
Take your time.
Yeah. Okay, so we talk about historic preservation and development kind of separately. Is there a way we could maybe try and emphasize the need to balance those two things together and potentially use historic preservation as an economic driver? We see a lot of tourism and things like that for certain historic buildings. I know like the Wareham is a good example of that, right? The building itself still has a lot of history, but it is going to be updated and modern and still be very useful. Is there kind of anything like that in here, or can we add anything like that?
Yeah, Chapter 9 of Part 2. Pages 103 and 104 talk about historic preservation as a planning topic. there's always that tension there, right, between, you know, progress and historic preservation. That's fully recognized and kind of, looked at in terms of how do we kind of flip that on its head? How do we use historic preservation as an economic development tool? So that's actually exactly why the Wareham Hall project was used as a conceptual project in the historic core. It represents kind of the best of both worlds there, where we've got a project that is revitalizing an existing historic asset and leveraging its historic significance by pursuing, you know, financial incentives related to that. So it recognizes that there is definitely a placemaking aspect and a cultural significance to historic preservation, while acknowledging that, you know, we need to continue to move forward as a community.
Yeah.
So here's some guidance to help you with that.
Okay.
I think the community house is a nice example of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because you know, in the action items, you know, historic infrastructure is one of those, and it's a due when, and due when historic preservation grants or funding, and I guess we do need the funds or the funding to be able to address those. I think we did apply for a grant recently for that. I think that's something that's really important to identify early and be proactive with when we're looking at development. So I'm glad it's in there. And then last thing, kind of nitpicky, the word holistic is used a couple of times in the report, and it is
Spelled
spelled
wrong.
2 different ways. And I think you can spell it both ways.
Probably British.
Yeah, one is with a W, the other one is without. I don't know. I don't care how it's spelled. I noticed that it was different, and you know, maybe a little bit of consistency there. But
Thank you, yeah.
other than that, like, it was great. It really got my wheels turning. It was a good read. Spent a couple hours over the weekend reading it, and thank you very much for putting it together. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a couple of questions? We did a study in 2020. How did this differ from that? Or was it more or less the same area, or did it expand the area?
What study are you referring to?
We did a downtown, didn't we do a downtown thing in 2020?
2000.
Oh, 2000. Oh, I missed it too. Okay. So one thing that I thought maybe we should pull out and sort of add to the bullet points are some of the difficulties we might face in I mean, you know, it sounds pretty rosy, but there are some issues like with the brownfield area, along the river, accessing over the levee, ADA. I mean, they're just a bunch of things that I thought, I don't want it to be negative, but just sort of in our face. These are issues that we have faced here with this area, or drainage, or some, like that, and that we have to make sure that we have in the back of our minds when we go forward with this spot or that spot. Because we've had a lot of people really enthusiastic about having something along the river, and it's just come to naught. I mean, it's just not, there've been too many issues. And what came out of that brownfield study? Is the land safe for, what did we find out? What was there that created the need for the study?
So the area was identified by city staff as we were looking at, or kind of in the middle of kicking off our downtown plan. We thought it might be a helpful component. So that area was identified specifically. We were aware that there were some brownfield sites. Brownfields can also be a lot of things.
Yeah, I know.
Even just lead paint on a building can potentially qualify it as a brown site or a brownfield site. So, in a kind of an industrial area with a history of the railroad, there was
You're just
likely
checking
some
it out. It was great that
candidates.
the regional planning organization came through. Yeah.
But
Well,
it basically allows property owners to volunteer to be studied in the future and receive those results and understand what mitigation efforts might be needed. There was also a planning component to it, which made it a little bit special, which is why we were able to do some of that imagery associated with the catalyst sites.
Well, I just, I really enjoyed reading it, and the things you pointed out, I just felt maybe there should be some, little stars that say, this is an issue in this area particularly, or something like that, or just because it's not all perfect down there,
Yeah, a lot of that may have been covered in the background report, which is an appendix to this already fairly lengthy document.
Karen, the regional council looked at 3 areas. This was one. We entertained the 4th and Bluemont roundabout area for a few weeks, and then we pivoted. We ended up at Plaza West with the regional council looking at that too. So that might have been around the 2020 time period. I don't know if Ben or Stephanie, you remember when we were engaged around that time?
Around then.
Yeah, I was on a LUST study, leaking underground storage tanks. So it's something I always think about.
Ben, I would also like to commend you for the quality of the report, even though I was reading clearly one that's already a little bit outdated. But it read really well, the structure flowed nicely. I have one question about a comment that Peter just made regarding wanting to have a certain amount of flexibility and aspirational quality to what type of development might take place in these areas that have been identified. And this is reflecting my lack of familiarity with zoning concepts. So one of the first 2 do now points is look at the zoning districts and regulations. I understand the need to be proactive in terms of doing those. Is there a risk of creating a box that would have to be rezoned later in order to accommodate one of these more creative or aspirational uses?
And that's a consideration when we approach that action item. We'll essentially look at, take inventory of all the zoning districts in the plan area, and then kind of overlay that with the vision, with the conceptual model, looking at the principles, any conceptual projects, and then seeing, okay, if we want this to happen, if this is the vision, does this zoning either hinder that, or maybe it allows too much, is particularly in transitional areas. So that assessment still needs to be made, but definitely key to seeing that vision come to fruition.
Thanks.
Just going to add kudos for the report and also the process. I participated in a lot of these, and I thought it was really good, and also thanks to all the people who participated in it. I mean, it took a lot of effort. I think you did a lot of creative things with the Legos and everything like that to put together in the meetings.
Thank you.
I guess I'll just make 2 comments. I've got several emails, people concerned about one of the things shown in the plan is closing points and making it pedestrian, because the vision there is pedestrian-free, and I got a lot of negative feedback on, turning that into a pedestrian-only area, especially from my barber. You're stuck in the barber chair at Morgan's. He's not for that, at all. So I just wanted to pass that on, that one. And then the other one that, and it was already sort of mentioned by Karen, this riverfront thing is troubling. I know there's a lot of people that push for that, but that, that concrete plant is there. And a lot of people in that neighborhood would be more interested in just rerouting the trucks. And, the plan should change the railroad crossing so the trucks aren't driving through the residential area. So some more simplistic things like that. But generally, I think, it's a great plan, and it is impressive that the staff put this together and we didn't hire a consultant for $250,000. So you're commended for that. That was
Thank you.
excellent work.
If I could address those
Yep, go
two
ahead.
items. One, connectivity to the kind of South Manhattan or South Fort Riley Boulevard area was a topic of discussion in looking at concepts for potential redevelopment in that area. We don't foresee, if we're talking, low, medium, and high growth and a 25-year plan horizon, we were internally joking that, a riverfront development at the scale that the consultants came up with would probably be a high growth scenario at year 25. So it's pretty ambitious. But those kind of lower and medium growth scenarios in that study area do actually talk about moving the crossing over to, like you said, help aid with MCM's operations and keep traffic out of more residential areas to the west. The second thing, in terms of pedestrianization points, we never specifically prescribe, shutting down any streets, completely pedestrianizing them. The wording in that, under that image, is intentionally vague. It talks about pedestrian orientation. We don't say anything about, we need to shut it down. It talks about looking at or exploring the potential pedestrianization, maybe temporary or permanent closing of streets throughout downtown as appropriate. So it's intentionally vague, but we wanted to leave the door open, similar to our process in Aggieville, where we knew we wanted to make it more pedestrian oriented, but there was a lot more work in the future to figure out exactly what that means. And so now we're just now kind of working through that in terms of streetscape improvements and, are we going to shut down certain streets? Are we not? Are they temporary? How do we do that? So a detail like that would, and especially on a street like Points, would kick off an entirely new public process.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the issues when you do a plan that's like 20, 25 years out. A lot of people make an inference that something's going to happen immediately because you got a concept plan, and of course it always
If only.
it always melds. Like the Aggieville plan. I mean, there was talk about closing Morrow, and we ended up changing it to another street, and then not closing it entirely, but just put bollards in place and redesign the streetscape so that for certain events you could close it, but it would never be permanently closed. And so I think that's how this will evolve too. So I think that's part of it. Is it's a process that will change over time and adapt. As Peter said, it's got the flexibility to go with whatever happens to come up. Like the river thing might happen if MCM for some reason decides they want to move and go to a different location. Then you might want to jump on that. But the idea that the city's going to chase them out of here is not the case. Okay, any other comments? I guess on that note, we can take a motion. We had public comment, that's right. I've almost forgotten. Is there any public comment? I'm sure there is.
Good evening, Commissioners. Gina Snyder, Executive Director of Downtown Manhattan. I've been up here before to say this. The work that was done by Community Development led by Ben, absolutely phenomenal. You're absolutely right to say that they did the job of what you would hire a consultant to do. The interaction with the community over longer than a year, every event we had, meetings, I mean, they were just there talking, reaching out to the community. It was absolutely impressive. The only thing I want to add, other than just really loving this path forward, this roadmap, is just the Points Avenue thing. I actually got a call from a reporter today on that. For 12 years, DMI has sent out both stakeholder and patron surveys every year. And 12 years ago, it was an absolute never, ever, don't ever close Points Avenue to vehicular traffic. And as we've grown so much and really become a dynamic location, that survey has gone to about 50%. That's not enough to do anything, but it is interesting, to say the least, that we have now people looking at the possibility of sort of taking on that European or definitely a more urban type of setup. But just so you all know, I mean, I don't think that was the intention of anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Anyone else wish to make comment on the plan? Well, interesting. Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and come back to the commission.
I'll move that we approve the first reading of an ordinance amending the Manhattan Urban Area Comprehensive Plan by adopting the Beyond Tomorrow Downtown Plan.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner McCullough?
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Opelt?
Yes.
Commissioner Motta?
Yes.
Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Commissioner Adamczyk?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, and that brings us to item B on the general agenda, which is consider discussing development incentives for development of lots 1 through 10 of Lee Mill Village.
Good evening. I do not have a presentation, but I will pull up the staff memo that was attached in case we want to reference it. I won't go into too much of the background here. It was in your packet, but basically in 2017 we acquired 35 lots, and we are still stuck with 10 of those. So we have done multiple RFPs. We have had these 10 lots listed for sale with a local realtor for several years now, and it wasn't until last year when we issued a RFP that we received our first formal proposal for the development of these 10 lots. Frontier Development Group was the only proposal that we did receive through that RFP process, and we entered into an MOU with that developer to begin to explore what it would take to make it work for both parties for those properties to be transferred for development. We hired SMH to develop several concept designs of what that layout of those lots could look like, and we ended up coming up with Concept 4, which was attached to in your packet. Concept 4 would end up creating 6 duplexes, 12 units total, and it had a total project cost about $3.56 million for the developer to deliver those 6 duplexes. So this evening, what we have, the kind of the conversation and the feedback that we're looking from you all is the city is being requested a cash incentive to make this project pencil out for the developer. And I'll go ahead and mention Tyler Holloman. He is with Frontier Development. He's here this evening. He can address any of your questions that you might have specifically on that project, as well as Jason. He's been involved with this probably longer than he's wanted to be. So that $260,000 of the cash incentive that's being requested, it is, I'll go ahead and scroll down. I had in here a table of what those 12 units would end up generating in ad valorem over the course of 10 years and then over the course of 20 years. And the city would recoup its cash investment from those in about year 12 is what it would end up being. There's also the city foregone revenue. That meaning that we would likely not ever receive this revenue if the project weren't to move forward. And those 3 were, we would transfer the lots from the city to Frontier at no cost. It is highly likely that we would be able to sell these, so we would just end up keeping them ourselves. That the city would pay off the $181,000 in remaining special assessments using the utility funds. The city's been paying the special assessments on these lots since 2017, and we've actually paid a total of $268,000 since 2017. So the developer is requesting that we would end up paying those specials off. And then lastly is the request for an additional revenue bond for sales tax exemption. Again, if this project doesn't move forward, we never would have received that revenue. So the total cash incentive is really kind of what I focused on here for the analysis. That ends up being, so the $260,000 would go towards public improvements of the property. Concept 4 actually had the lowest public improvement amount of all the concepts that we looked at. If we would have gone with one of those other concepts, that $260,000 cash incentive request probably would have been higher. It is also going towards building permit fee, utility connection fees, and then private utility extensions, the gas and electric, having to get that down further on south on the site. So that ends up constituting about 7.3% of the total project cost, just under $22,000 per unit. With that, I will stop there, see if you have any questions or if there's anything Jason wants to add at this point.
Yeah, this evening, we would like to get some direction from the commission if they would like to proceed, where we would, if the commission desires to move forward, a development agreement would be necessary. The $260,000, we would bring back options for you all to consider from a cash incentive perspective. But the agreement, much like we did with the community building, would be kind of a stair step. Developer takes action, we take action. Building permit is issued, there's a certain amount of that 260 that can go out. A certain amount of money that's invested, I think Tyler indicated a little over $3 million. So we could have him document this first million or his second million or his third million, much like we did with Ben down at the community building. So that's the kind of structure and agreement we're thinking about. If you need more history and background on that or on Lee Mill Village, we're happy to provide that this evening as well. But we would look for a relationship with the developer where they would take risk and we would provide a reward in a stair-step process.
Does any of this fit under the Workforce Housing Initiative?
We've been trying to keep this subject out of that pot of money.
Okay.
It doesn't mean the commission can't entertain it and we can talk about it. It's just we fell into this mess, in 2017, 7 years ago, trying to satisfy it with the resources outside of that.
Yeah, I was really not thinking about using that money, but just, does it fit under the umbrella of saying, okay, these would be, sold or rented and fit in the workforce housing thing, because that would, be an interesting.
Yeah.
And that's not included in here, so I don't know, but when you do the development agreement, I think it'd be interesting to say, okay, what are these gonna be marketed for? And do they complement our workforce housing initiative? That's not saying we'd use any of the money. I get where you're coming from.
So these would, from what I understand, and Tyler can clarify, these would be just at that upper end of our workforce housing range. The appraised value that I used for this table here on the screen was $325,000. That may be a conservative estimate just to see what those revenues would look like. But certainly, I mean, it's up to Tyler and any surprises along the way that may make that project cost go up, and he would have to obviously reflect that on his end.
Yeah, the other thing, Jason, just to clarify, I've been looking at that chunk of property since 2011. I think Rod Harms gave me a tour of it the first time I ran for office and said this is a disaster. And we've been chipping away at it. Now, we did build one other project there. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, the
Karen's.
The Chudo's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that took care of a piece of it. And then I know we've tried, over the years to try to market it and get it off the city's books. And I've always seen that all those lots as a liability for the city. And I think it's just we tried to sell it at market value. We couldn't do that. So I'm all for, proceeding with this because it makes absolutely no sense for the city to keep it.
Okay.
I would endorse providing some help with this project as well. The earlier units are basically my backyard, and those were being sold as quickly as they were being finished. I think these are going to be very desirable properties, and I think they'll be added to the tax rolls pretty quickly as they're completed.
Is the 180,000 in specials part of the 260? Okay, so that's just in addition to.
Correct.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I met Tyler out at the site a couple weeks ago, and when you actually go and walk through it, you can see how difficult it is to build anything there. And so if we want this to come back on the tax rolls, you know, I think we're going to have to do something, because really it would not be realistic for any builder to build anything with the current structure and everything like that. So I think the biggest crux is just going to be where the money comes from. But you know, if we get some options, I absolutely think we should look at it.
And if we don't, we're still gonna pay the special.
Exactly.
In the property tax.
So
Yeah.
it's, you know, when you think about it, it's not, we're not really losing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was out of the site as well, and I had just the same concern as where we're getting the money from. So if you just want to know if we want to proceed, I'm yes, but obviously need to know where we're going to get the money to make it happen.
We're annually receiving a payment from K-State for the KSUIC building. It's $457,000 annually. We are currently putting that revenue in one of the economic development funds. We're not obligated to put it in one of the economic development funds. We could move it into another area and be allowed for this. There are other options as well. I'm happy to present those to you all, but that's the one that really unrestricted at this point. It's an option. We get that payment every December from the university, and we'll receive it through 2032.
Good. Any other commissioner comments before we open public comment?
Did you want Tyler to speak at all?
Yep. That'd be good.
Anything?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Tyler Holloman with Frontier. I don't have a whole lot to add tonight. I think Jason and Stephanie did a great job kind of presenting our plan and talking through a little bit of the challenges of the site. And I know I've had some individual conversations with you all, but I will say, you know, as a group, we're passionate about infill development. I've been up here before talking to you about the needs of infill development, or the need to encourage and prioritize infill development. I think this is a opportunity to do that and to kind of showcase what's possible. However, it is an extremely challenging site, and you know, we've worked through a lot of different scenarios. You know, it kind of looks simple on paper up there, but you know, that site plan is a result of a lot of hours, and again, especially to Stephanie's credit and Jason's credit, you know, they've met with me probably more times than they care to, just, you know, as we've walked through different options on how we can kind of minimize the amount of city, you know, financial support that this needs. As I fully recognize that any sort of incentive request is always challenging, and so we've tried to really look at this and say, how can we work within the challenges of the site, work within the existing infrastructure as much as possible, but also, you know, get a product out there that we think would be marketable. And I believe that this does this. So be happy to answer any specific questions that you have, but we really try to look at this and figure out what is the cleanest and the clearest way to make something happen here.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, questions?
Can you just highlight, you know, for folks that are maybe watching, talk about like with the road that was supposed to go through there and why we're going to have to move those units up and kind of change that sidewalk a little bit?
Yep, and so that's a great question, and it's kind of difficult to see from a site plan, but if you, I would encourage you to drive by or to walk the site. The original plat, or the PUD from the original developer, had a road basically going kind of right on the edge of, or kind of right in bisecting the current driveways and the eastern edge of what we've got drawn as the houses. And on paper, it looks fine, but when you actually get out there and walk the site, the road, you know, one, it's very expensive to develop that long, narrow road. You don't actually get any additional units, so it doesn't increase the unit count as to what we have drawn here, but it pushes all the units back into the ravine, and so that makes the units very expensive to develop, and then it also makes them less desirable because there's zero backyard and you know, really zero yard, and it puts them on that hilltop. The other problem with the site that's difficult to see is that the original developer at some point had went in there and completely cut the site. So there's zero topsoil on that site at all. It's down to just essentially bedrock, exposed bedrock, which is why nothing has grown there for the last 10 years or however many. That's not necessarily, that in itself is not necessarily a problem, except for it makes it expensive to develop the site because people like grass and yards, and so there's a lot of additional topsoil and grading and extra work that has to go in just because it was not properly thought out at the onset.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Is there any public comment on this particular project? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioners, any further comments? I don't guess we need a motion, but you basically got all the information you need from the five of us. Okay, so the next item is that we have an executive session, and I'm not sure how much time we need. Do you have a 15 minutes? Okay, so we'll go into executive session until 7, let's make it 7:35. We need a motion for that.
I move that we go into executive session and return at 7:35.
We have to read that
Oh,
entire thing there because
forget
of
it.
the requirements.
I'm sorry.
Recess.
I move that we recess into executive session to receive information on a legal matter in consultation with the city attorney, which would be deemed privileged in an attorney-client relationship pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2, and to resume the open meeting in the city commission room at 7:35 PM.
Second?
Do we have a motion and a second? City Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Opel?
Yes.
Commissioner Motta?
Yes.
Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Commissioner Adamczyk?
Yes.
Commissioner McCullough?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, we're recessed now into executive session.
It's like
Jason only needs 15 minutes to talk about this. The mango's different.
I would assume so. Seems like they need more than 20, which is what they give themselves.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Brenda, are you out tomorrow?
No.
You're not?
No.
You sure?
Yeah.
You gonna be on Thursday?
Probably not. Probably here rest of the week.
Then you need to take some time off?
I did, but
What do you got going on?
it's too much to deal with right now.
The-
Open records and,
Well, we can delay the open records, you know that.
I know, but I got John Brake to deal with and
Well, we always have John Brake to deal with.
haven't for a while. I think it was,
Yeah, actually, I haven't heard that name in a minute.
behind on emails and there's too much to do right now. I was gonna ask you, I need to set up a meeting. Mel Boris has contacted me regarding Flag Day, so I need to set up a meeting with him. Since there's a lot of involvement with Parks and Rec and building maintenance, do you still want me to kind of coordinate everything?
I don't think you need to. I mean, that's just in a ceremony that goes out in front of the,
And I'm basically just coordinating things.
Is this a-
Andy Hardy, we have to reserve case we have bad weather, and they have the sound equipment, and building maintenance brings over the, podium, and the microphone, so really, I'm just a coordinator, so.
What's the, who puts on Flag Day?
It's Mel Borst and Stormy Kennedy. They're just individuals. They've done it for several years. Rob wanted someone from the manager's office to be involved, but all I really do is coordinate things.
And they do it out in front of City Hall, right?
Yeah, but Mel and Stormy pretty much takes all the contact with everybody else, speakers, and
So the only work that you do is,
just coordinate. Coordinate with Andy Har and building maintenance. Which-
what does Dustin do?
He sets up, set up, tear down. He probably honestly has a checklist of everything that needs to be done.
I mean, I just have